All right. Well, we are now right at 7 o'clock. Edith, are you ready to go? Because I will go over some quick housekeeping things. You're automatically muted when you join Zoom, and we aren't going to be able to see you. But you can communicate with my colleagues. There's me, Liz Arbuckle, Amy Wyatt, Rebecca Comfort, Janet Seymour, Kristen Luffelman, and Luke Erlinson, and Sarah Noonan. Sarah and Rebecca are going to be monitoring and helping out with Facebook. And the others of us will be helping out in this area in the Zoom. So they'll be checking on your questions. So the chat function is going to be turned off throughout Edith's whole presentation so she doesn't keep getting pop-ups. And because you can't communicate verbally, we ask any questions you have to put in the Q&A box. So right down here at where it says Q&A above little bubble words. Oh, thanks, Kristen. So you can ask any question. We'll be monitoring this and we'll get those to Edith. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end of the program for Edith to take questions. We will recording this and we will send you that after the webinar. Not right away, give us a day or two. Sometimes we got to check things over. And so just a reminder, chat will be closed, but Q&A will be open. We'll open chat at the end if you have any final comments like, good job, Edith, or anything like that. Those are always nice to see at the end as well. Okay, can we go to, all right. Now it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Edith Leoso. Sorry, Edith, I didn't think I was gonna get through that sentence. Who is a Bad River Ojibwe, a tribal elder, a wonderful resource, and I'm so glad she could join us here tonight. I'm gonna turn it over to Edith so that she can introduce herself. Thanks for coming, Edith.
Bonjour. I'm glad you made it through that, Liz. As always, when I speak to people, I have been taught to introduce myself in my language, and my language is Ojibwe, the Ojibwe language, also known as Chippewa. So I'd like to say, bonjour, indwe magini duk, nigani gabo wikwe indigenous cause, gaye migazin dodem, gaye mashkisibi onjaba. So what I said to you was greetings, all my relatives. That word Maganidu, that says my relatives here and over there. And I always hope to be able to be talking as though everybody's listening to me like I'm talking to my relatives. So if I holler at you every now and then, it's all right. Just kidding. So, and I also said that I'm called Nigani Gabuikwe, which means leading woman. Simply put in English, it actually means I am the woman who stands upright in front of others as to lead them. And my aunt was Gladys Bearhart. And so with that, I also said Migzian Dodem, which means that I am of the Eagle clan, the Bald Eagle clan. And Mashkisibi in Onjaba means that I am from Swamp or Medicine River, which everybody knows as Bad River now, except that's not what that word means. So I just wanted to say that in opening. I wanted to also make some acknowledgements to my teachers who taught me how to tell a story by example. They were the ones who told me stories and I sat and listened to them. I have never been actually called a storyteller before. And when they asked me to do this, I was like, oh, sure. But, you know, I do a lot of talking to a lot of different people and a lot of different things for work. I work as a tribal historic preservation officer, but I've never really did storytelling. So I want to say miigwech to my mother, my grandmother, my aunties, Archie Moseaban, Joe Shibayashaban, Gladys Bearhart-Ban, Joe Mekwanabe-Ban, Corky White-Ban, Mary and Harry Roberts-Ban, Louise Shibagig Josephine Corbine, Karen Corbine, Joe Rose Leo Bazan Staples, and Edward Benton Benet. Also my uncle who recently traveled to the western doorway of the spirit world, whose name we won't mention until a year has passed. But he was one of the co-founders of the American Indian movement who called me niece. The word Ibun, you may have heard me mention many times in naming these people. And that means that they have gone on to leave their physical form and now travel back and forth from the spirit world. So it's been over a year that they've been gone. I'd like to also acknowledge those Indigenous authors that continue to maintain old stories in writing and stories of the recent past as well. Patty Lowe, as everybody knows her, Anton Truer, Leslie Marmon Silko, and that list just keeps going and going and going. So later on, I'll show you a few of the books that I actually look at. For my elders listening tonight, I want to ask for your forgiveness if I offend you in any way tonight, because I didn't intend to do that. And I just wanted to say that beforehand so that you know that I'm not here to be harmful to anyone. I would also like to recognize those tribal members and Indigenous people with mixed ethnicity originating from Africa tonight. Today is the first day of National Black History Month. So I'd like to acknowledge our Indo-Amagna who may be joining us tonight. A new book to read, if you're interested in Black history, is called The 1619 Project, a new origin story by Nicole Hannah-Jones. And that book is sort of bringing a little bit of controversy as it decolonizes the language, which is something that I really like to do myself. And it kind of brings me to what we're talking about tonight, which is Indigenous storytelling and a few stories about a thing or two. And so when I talk about stories, I think about, you know, what is a story, you know, and when we actually think about what a story is, it's essentially a presentation based on a person's beliefs, maybe their embellished reality, their fictitious thoughts, their dreams or memories. And a story can be like spoken, like I'm doing tonight. It can be done from memory. And I think, I want to say Scooter, it's Michael Laughing Fox. Charette talked about this last time, that it should be spoken from the heart when we're doing this. Otherwise, it's like scripted. Sometimes that story is written down in books, right? And other ways of writing. And they're also drawn in pictures or photographs or motion pictures now, or memes even now. So there's different ways of storytelling. Indigenous people's stories were given in all of those forms, except for memes, maybe. They were very creative in how they wrote those stories down. They put them down on birch bark scrolls. They put them up on stones. And a lot of times, you know, it told a story of an event that happened during that time. Some people call them petroglyphs now. To us, they're stories of the past and how those people wanted to express themselves. And it's always good to be able to write down something and talk about it later. And like I said before, I've never been called a storyteller before. So this is a real honor tonight to speak here. I'm not sure what Indigenous storytelling is, though. I think that it is a Native people telling a story, and some might believe that it should be a romanticized version of a myth or legend to make people feel better. But my stories were never called that, but they were told to teach me something. And I want to tell you something that many of my teachers have told me before they started a story. And one of the things that they said to me was that whenever someone is telling a story, be still and listen carefully, because you may never hear this story told in this way ever again. Maybe you'll hear it told again by somebody, but never in this way. So always be respectful in that manner to be able to sit still. Now, I'm lucky because I'm on a webinar and I can't see anybody, I can't hear anybody. So to me, you're sitting still and being very attentive right now. With that, I want to be able to talk about, some things that have happened in my lifetime. One of the stories that I always see too is about Wewenabujou. And I've been told about him ever since I was about 8 years old. And my grandmother, she used to tell me stories. I mean, she was like the Stephen King for me of the day, because they were really scary stories, and I was just totally entranced by them. And so here, my grandma, she used to lay there in her bed and she'd be reading Louis L'Amour paperback Western novels, and I'd be pacing back and forth, in front of her bedroom there. And finally she'd put her book down and look at me and say, yeah. And I'd be like, so what are you doing? Well, I'm reading a book. And she'd tell me, she said, what do you want? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you want to tell me something? Because every time she started the story out, she said, okay, I want to tell you something now. And she would start telling me all these different things, and one thing would lead to another and another and another. And there were so many things that she talked about. I remember her taking me one time over to the river, and she was teaching me how to pray with tobacco. Tobacco is one of our 4 sacred medicines, and the other 3 is sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. And so those 4 medicines, it's the tobacco that we feel that we can communicate better with the spirit world with. And that's how it was given to us by the Creator, was that we would know that plant when we came here. And in knowing that plant, we would be able to use that plant to speak to the Creator if we needed to. And so that's what I used tonight, to be able to know what it was I am going to speak about tonight, because I never really plan anything when I start speaking. So with that, my grandmother, when she used to lay there in bed and read her novels, I would ask her to tell me a story. Say, okay, I want to tell you something then. Come on and sit down here. And so she would tell me story after story, and maybe 2 stories a night, and then she would stop. And whenever I would ask her a question, like about that, something in the story, which was very significant, she would say, well, when you get older, you'll know when you get older. And I had to remember that story. That caused me to remember that story until I became an adult, and I was still thinking about that story. One of the stories that she told me was about the Hoof Man. And if you have children in the room, you might, if they're 8 years old or older, it's all right. But, This is sort of a scary story. And it was told to children, though, in order to keep them in line, I believe. And her story was set back in probably the mid 1800s. And the reason why I say that is because of the language she used in it. She said, there was once this young girl, and she wasn't an adult yet. She was like a teenager, and she wanted to go to this dance. And in going to a dance, you know, she said back then they called it a ball. That's what dances were called, balls. And I told that to my grandson once, and he just laughed and laughed. Anyways, the setting then is the mid 1800s that she's talking about, and the Victorian era, sort of, or pre-Victorian era. And so here she talked about this girl who wouldn't listen to her grandparents or her parents. And she was staying with her grandparents, which was the same thing I was doing. And my grandmother said, so this girl, she wouldn't listen to her grandparents, even though her grandmother told her, you can't go to the ball. Because at that time, in the mid 1800s, when you went to a ball, you had to have an escort. And that's what she told me. You had to have an escort, and a male escort. It had to be your father, a relative, like an uncle, or a fiance, somebody you were going to be married to. Other than that, you know, you probably could have gone with your older brother, maybe, but it was better if you went with your uncle or your father. And so this girl, they told her, you could go if you can find an escort. And so she looked all over, asked people. They said, no, we were not going to take you, because they knew she was sort of rambunctious and things like that, and some kind of way, you know. And so she didn't find anybody. And so she said, well, I don't need an escort anyways. And so she told her grandmother, you know, I didn't find anybody. And her grandmother said, oh, well, then you can't go. But instead of listening to her grandmother, she snuck out the window, and she took off and went to the ball. And when she arrived there, there was a gentleman pulling up in a carriage, because this is, you know, pre-vehicle time. There was no cars around. There was still horse and buggies. That was during this time. And he pulled up in front with the horse carriage of where the ball was going to be held at. And it was this big dance hall where they were at. And when he pulled up, she said, oh, he was so good looking. He was so handsome. And he wore these tails, which is sort of like a Abraham Lincoln kind of coat that went long in the back. And he had a top hat, she said, which is like an Abraham Lincoln top hat, like that. And so she asked him, you know, was very forward for that time, to ask him, could you escort me into the ball? And she was just mesmerized by him. And he was so handsome. And for some reason, she felt funny, and that she, you know, was just glued to this guy. And so he said, sure, I'll take you there on one condition. And the condition is you only dance with me. And so she said, okay, you know. And so the gentleman then, he escorted her in. Now you have to remember, back in the 1800s, to dance with one man who was not your fiance more than twice was like taboo. You were looked at like not a very nice person, right? So So there she was. She danced with him once, danced with him twice, and then danced with him a third time, which was like, oh, hey, what's up with this? So after the third time, she sort of felt, you know, a little embarrassed by what she had just done, and asked him, do you think you could take me home now? And he said, sure, I'll take you home. I'll take you somewhere. I'll take you home, he said. And so they left the ball. They got in the carriage. And as they were riding down the road, she noticed that they were starting to go faster and faster, and they went right past her road. And she's like, hey, we're not going to my home. And he said, he just started laughing. And it was this really, really wicked laugh. And she became frightened of him. And she was looking at him as he was laughing. He put his head back like that, and his hat fell back. And she could see that this man had horns on top of his head. And as he moved to the side like that, she could see that he also had something behind his coattails, which looked pretty much like another tail. And during that time, that era of dress, the men wore these very wide pants at the bottom and almost covering their shoes. And when she looked down, he lifted his leg up as he was laughing, and she could see that his feet were not feet. They were not shoes. There were hoofs on his shoes. And she could see then that they were heading straight towards the river. And as as he just kept on laughing, she's like, what's going on? And so she then decided, this is not a good situation for me. So she pushed the door open and jumped out of the carriage just as he was going into the river. And she had noticed, in looking back at him, that there was no driver to that carriage, that these horses looked really demonized, and it went right into the river. And my grandmother, you know, by then, you know, as an 8-year-old, I'm like, oh my God, you know, and my grandmother said, you know, what did you learn from that story? Because all our stories are something to be learned from. You know, there's a story within a story always. And there's always a moral to every story, right? So I said, well, listen to you, Grandma, of course. And she's like, yes, that's true. And as time went on, you know, just as my grandmother would say to me, you'll know when you're an adult. And when she told me that story, she said, do you believe that story? I said, well, yeah, you told it to me. Okay, she said. And so from then on, you know, I thought about that. And as I became an adult, I actually worked for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. And one of the things that I did was I worked I counted aquatic birds out in the sloughs, in the Bad River sloughs. So one day we had to get up at, you know, be out there in the sloughs by 5:30 in the morning, which meant we had to be, you know, on site at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I'm all groggy and everything. We go out to the sloughs and it's about 10 o'clock in the morning. And after counting thousands and thousands of ducks going by, we decided to take a break, and we had pulled the boat. It was just like a duck boat, and we pulled it into this little stream area. And so as I was sitting there, it was really starting to get hot out. So I put my hand in the water like that, and I looked down into the water, and there under the water was a wagon wheel. And I said, what? You know, the first thing that came back to me was my grandmother's story. And I thought, oh my God, was she really telling me the truth here? But it was true. That's what I had seen myself in the water was a wagon wheel. Now, you can believe that or go with it, you know, let it go. And so there was many other stories that came from my grandmother, you know. One time when she had taught me how to pray with tobacco by the river there, I had, you know, been just, you know, somebody who was oblivious at the time, you know, just a little 8, 9-year-old. And I was picking up rocks and I was whipping them out into the river like that, and just minding my own business, looking around at stuff. And she seen me throw rock in, and she said, do you want me to throw rocks at you? And I said, no. And she said, well, then don't do that to the water. And I said, okay. And I was thinking in my head, but why, you know? And she must have known by the way I looked. She said, when you get older, you'll understand why. And I was like, oh, okay. She said, but I want to tell you another story. And this story is about a little boy. I said, okay. And so here, one of the things that I was doing when I was throwing rocks in was that there was this little whirlpool that was going on in the river. And if you've ever looked at some rivers, you'd see these whirlpools that were in there. Well, one time, so there I was trying to plop a rock into that whirlpool. She said, you know, this one time there was this boy who he was walking along the banks of the river with his grandmother. And just like you, he was doing something to the water. And here he had a stick and he kept poking that little whirlpool with the stick. And his grandmother was saying, don't do that now. Don't be rude to the water. And how would you like somebody to poke you? And so he just kind of giggled at her. And she said, you're going to upset the spirits of the water. So stop doing that. And so there she was. They had been picking berries along the river there. And so he was just kept it up and was poking that whirlpool, and the whirlpool kept going too. And so she turned around and she turned back and he was gone. They spent days looking for him. Like 4 days had gone by. And finally, they found him laying on the bank of the river. And she said to him, where were you? We were so worried, sick. We had a whole bunch of people looking for you. We've been looking for days for you. What happened? And so that little boy proceeded to tell his story about what happened to him. And he said, well, he just hugged his grandmother and he says, Grandma, I will always listen to you forever. I will always listen to you. And you could tell he was trembling and he was afraid. And his grandmother said, what happened? Tell me what happened. Finally, a time came by and that little boy started talking about what happened. And he said, I was poking the water with that stick. And sure enough, them water spirits grabbed the stick and pulled on it. And I thought, I don't want them to have my stick. So I started pulling back and I was hanging on with 2 hands and they pulled me right into the whirlpool. Said as I was in the whirlpool, the water was all around me. Said, and I could hear those water spirits talking to me. And those water spirits said, you are disrespectful to us. And for that, we're going to drown you. And he pleaded with them. He said, I began begging him, and, no, 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 I know I should have never did that. I should have never did that. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just don't drown me. And so the little boy, he was there, and he said that the water spirits, they said, okay, we're going to do something then. We're going to give you this. And what they gave him, my grandmother said, was what was called a water drum. And that they said, and they gave him a stick. They said, you need to sing with this water drum for 4 days and for 4 nights. And you have to keep singing. If you stop singing, we're going to drown you. And so that little boy took that drum. She was like this. He took it and he was like this. And he was singing with that drum. And he kept singing song after song after song. And he didn't know, he said, where those songs were coming from, but he could just hear them. And so he sang them and sang them and sang them and sang them. And pretty soon, he could see, you know, it'd get dark and then it would get light. And he knew the first day went by, and then the second day, and then the third day. And then that little boy on the 4th day, he was hitting that, and he could see it getting darker. And he was hitting that drum and hitting that drum. And he thought he would have not any more energy again to hit it one more time. And as he collapsed, he thought for sure he would be drowned. He collapsed on his drum. And when he woke up, that is what they found him with, laying on the side on the bank of the river there. He was holding on to this drum. And he then sang all those songs for the community and told them, you know, these are the songs that I heard. And then that little boy, he listened to his grandmother. He never, ever doubted what his grandmother had to say after that. I wanted to say that little story for my own grandson who might be listening here tonight. And I hope that he hears it when his grandma is talking to him. So with that too, you know, one of our main storytellers that have been we've talked about many times was Wewena. And if you notice in the beginning of my introduction, I said to everybody, Wewena. We can say his name now. He is that person who some have called him the hero, some have called him, you know, the trickster, some have called him many things. But one thing that we have been taught is that we don't call him by his name until the snow is on the ground. And this is the time that we're able to tell the stories about him. And one of the stories that I remembered somebody telling me, but also I have read it several times in several different versions of the story, is the story of the duck dance, or this, it's also called how the hell diver got its red eyes. And a lot of Anishinaabe people, Anishinaabe is a word for that we call ourselves, because that particular word and that name, Anishinaabe, is what Wewena name was before it was Wewena. And so it was known as the first person here. And in some stories, they say he is one of the youngest of 4 brothers that were birthed here. And other stories, he is the first person lowered here with 3 others. of the 4 people that were lowered onto earth by the Creator. He was one of them. And he was quite the character while he was around. One of the things that my grandmother always told me was that he never died. He never, we never killed him, she said. We didn't kill him like they did to other people in other places. She said, Wena Buju, he just got in the canoe with his grandmother. And one of the things that he said, and it was at a time where people didn't want him anymore. They didn't want him around. And so he said, fine, I'm leaving. And when I come back, you're not going to know, I'm not going to look the same, and you're not going to know who I am. And so for a long while, people would say, when they seen another person, they would say, Wena Buju na? Are you Wena Buju? And so they're asking a question. Are you Wena Buju? Wena Buju na? And from that, it came to Wena Buju. And then from that, it came to Buju. And that's what we say today, Buju. And so from that, this guy, he just got into all kinds of things. And so I want to tell that story too, about that how the hell diver got his red eyes, or the duck dance, as it's called. And in that particular story, he's cruising along on the beach, right? He is just happy-go-lucky kind of guy, and he's just like, oh, and just wandering around place to place, because one of the things he was supposed to do was to name everything that he saw, right? Well, he did that. After that, he, found his grandmother, and he lived with her, and then he just wandered around the world, And one day he was wandering down the beach by these sloughs, and here he was, he started getting hungry. He's like, oh, I'm so hungry. And so he then came to near the mouth of those sloughs, and he was like standing there, and he's like, what is that sound I hear? And what he heard was a whole flock of ducks. He snuck up on them over there, and he was like looking at them. And Wena Buju, nobody trusted Wena Buju. And so he knew not to just go running after him, because they were going to take off. So he thought of something. He thought, I got to figure out a way to get these ducks. And he thought of something. And so he took off running into the woods. And in the woods there, he came across a field of rocks. And so he started gathering up all these good-sized rocks till he had this pile. He took it all to the mouth of the sloughs there, and he piled those rocks there. And he's seen some eagles sitting there, perched along the side there. He said, hey, I need your help with doing something. And eagles, were like, okay, what? He said, and if you do this for me, I'll let you have half of the ducks that I get. He said, because this is what I'm trying to get, those ducks over there. And he pointed to over there, right? That's how we point with the lips. And so there was Wena Buju, pile of rocks there. And he says, when I tell you so, you start, take these rocks, fly up in the air, and when you see me talking to those ducks, and they start going away, start dropping these rocks on me. They're like, all right then. And so Wena Buju went up to those ducks, and as he thought, they started moving away from him, swimming back, doing the backstroke away from Wena Buju. He's like, he's a shady character, this guy. And so the ducks, Wena Buju, he's trying to get their trust. So he says, hey, you're right. You guys just keep swimming around there. You're safer with me over here by the beach than you are up in the sky. And he looks up in the sky there, and of course the eagles are flying around and the ducks are looking like, oh, dang, okay, yeah, all right. He says, don't worry, brothers. I'll always take care of you. I'll always be good to you. And you'll always be safe around me. And of course, the ducks are like, okay. And they're still, like moving away. All of a sudden, those eagles start dropping these rocks, and they're bombing all these ducks. And so they're all going back over by the shore. And Wayna before he left, he says, hey, by the way, I'm having a little dance over here tonight. If you want to join me, you're welcome to come. But when you come over here, just line up and you'll hear the song, and don't open your eyes. If you open your eyes during these songs I'm going to sing, because they're my songs and it's my drum, you might get cursed with your eyes turning red. So don't open your eyes. But I'm having this, you're welcome to come over there. So as they're getting bombarded by the eagles with rocks, they take off and they all congregate on the shore, and they're like, should we go over by him? Should we go over by Wayna? What do you think? And so all the ducks are going, talking to each other, and they're like, okay, let's go over there. So they all start heading over there, and Wayna, he went and he made a little lodge already, and he had a fire going too. He built a fire on top of the sand, and he also made a lodge, and he used ironwood, and he used these rush mats to cover it because it's summertime, right? And so so he's sitting there, and he's sitting there inside his lodge, and he's seeing all of them coming. He says, hey, brothers, yeah, just make a roll like that. And remember, whatever you do, don't open your eyes, okay? So Wayna Boozhoo, he starts singing, right? And so he's singing there, and here's the song where I think the way it might have went was a little bit like this. Gego dichime ito chag aina bikon gigama miskwas ki bishigwam wayo hey hey. And after he would sing that, he started singing it over and over. And after each verse that he sang that, you could hear one duck go, wait. And he'd sing, Geko nichime ito chag aina bikon kigama miskwaski bishki shigwam hey 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 yo. And there was this one hell diver who was like, something is just wrong here. And so he was dancing there. He was getting closer and closer, and he could hear, people were the ducks had been talking amongst themselves, standing in line with their eyes closed. And so here he decided, he said, and Wayna Boozhoo, he was saying, yeah, when you come in, just dance right in the lodge and dance around here. I'll just keep singing till they're all in here, okay? And so there's a hell diver, and he's like, no, there's something shady going on here. So he opens his eyes, and what he sees just horrifies him. And he starts screaming, no! Run, everybody, run! Wayna Boozhoo is killing us. and they open their eyes, and he's still in shock there. All the ducks are taking off towards the lake again, and they're swimming as fast as they can because they're not going to fly because they still know the eagles are up in the sky. And he takes off like that. And just then, as the hell diver is going to turn and take off, Wayne Boujou was like, "What?" And he smushes that hell diver. He just trampled on him. And it's so hard that his eyes bulged out like that, and they got that red ring around their eyes. So there he was, Wayne Boujou. He had a pile of ducks. As they were dancing into his lodge, he just would grab them, break their neck, throw them in the pile, start singing again. And he had that pile of ducks there. Well, then he started getting his fire. His fire was burning, and it was almost down to coals, just the way he wanted. So then he took those ducks and he took their skins and skunned those ducks out. He took and laid some of the apple wood over the top of the coals like that. And then he laid all those ducks on there, on top of that apple wood, on the coals. And then he took the sand and he covered all of that up. He covered it up. And so where he would know where he put and buried those ducks that were cooking under the sand, he put their little duck feet up and above the sand. So when you walk by, there was all these duck's feet sticking up out of the sand. And so there was Wayne Boujou. He said, "Well, while those slow cook there, I'm going to take a nap in my wigwam here." And the eagles were like, "So, hey, what about our share?" And he's like, "What? What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about." And they're like, "Oh, okay. You're going to be that way about it?" So as he took a nap, the little eagles, they took off and they went and told some Indians, said, "Hey, Wayne Boujou is napping over there, and he's got a whole bunch of ducks cooking." And so there, they said, "Oh yeah." So they went over there by where Wayne Boujou's wigwam was at on the beach. And they could see those little duck feet sticking out of the sand like that, those Indians. And here they went up there, they snuck up there and they pulled those duck feet up. And they were they were ready to eat. And so they pulled all the duck feet off from them and they took the meat and put it into their canoes. And so they left the little duck feet back in the sand, sticking up out of the sand. And they paddled off with all of his ducks. And then they started laughing just loud. And just then Wayne Boujou woke up in his wigwam like that, and he's like, oh, geez, must be time to eat. Oh my God, those ducks must be tasty. They must be just tender and tasting just good with that apple wood. And so there, Wayne Boujou walked up to those little feet and he pulled on them and only the foot came up, and he said, "Oh, they're so tender, they're just falling apart." And so he noticed, he started digging and it's like, "Hey, where is my duck?" And all of the feet, he kept pulling them up and there it was just the feet. And he looked through the sand and there was no ducks. And then he could hear them laughing again. And he turned and looked up towards the river, and there was the Indians holding the duck leg up. "Be quick, Wayne Boujou!" And they started paddling away. And that is the story of how the hell diver got red eyes. he was smushed by a Buju, and how the duck dance came to be. So with that, I think we're at time now. I want to say miigwech for allowing me to say a few things about a thing or two tonight. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them as much as I could.
Miigwech, Edith. That was great listening to those stories. We had one come in. They really loved your scary stories for small children, and we're wondering if you were available for babysitting.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just joking. Anyway, I'm just playing. Well, but what's up?
My sister told that to her grandson, and he said, "That's the scariest story I ever heard." And he watched it. And he said it's scarier than it.
Well, someone had a question about, you mentioned the duck dance, but then they had a question about the duck and dive dance. Now, how are those different, and what's the story behind the duck and dive?
I'm not sure what the story is behind the duck and dive dance. That's a Western dance. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure even which tribe that came from out there, if it was the Cheyenne or the Sioux, or who it came from out that way. We have other dances. So the fish dance, the swan dance that the women do, the fish dance that the men do, the buck dance that the both of us do together, and several other dances that we have too, which someday we're going to be doing that again.
Yeah, eventually we'll be out of COVID, hopefully. But you raise a good point about that these dances are from lots of different places. So if you could just for 1 minute talk quickly about like what a Pan-Indian powwow. So if any of our guests tonight wanted to go to say a powwow, you know, what would they expect, and how would that be different from some of the things you were talking about?
Yeah, so each tribe, just about every tribe has a celebration, an annual celebration. Sometimes they have seasonal celebrations, you know, and for different things, and they're all over the United States. One of the places that they can go to find where they're at is powwows.com has a listing of many powwows and other, I can't remember the other website, but they're easy to find, and they're all throughout the United States, from, you know, California to Maine and Florida, and, you know, down to the Southwest and the Northeast and the Northwest. And they have different protocols for different places. You know, over here, you know, we have what's called a grand entry. And that grand entry, that's always led out by our veterans, who are always honored at every single event, dance event that we have. We honor our veterans. So that's something that I think that if they went online and looked up for a powwow, they would find a powwow near them. You people are dressed in their local attire, you know, of their traditional attire, their traditional clothing during that dance time. Like the last storytelling event, Scooter, Charette, Laughing Fox, I can't call him Laughing Fox, I was calling him Scooter. But anyways, he was dressed in his dance attire. I'm not tonight, but I do have like my shawl that's here tonight with me. And one of my shawls, I actually have, I think, 12 of them. And I also have my dance bag here, which I have a couple of these too, 3 of them, I think. And I have a couple of different outfits. And so usually the dancing starts on Friday, although some tribes have it during the week. because there's so many that are done on the weekend. That tribe started having their powwows during the weekday. So people could travel to a powwow, you know, for a month straight and always be at a powwow.
Sounds like fun to
But,
me.
yeah. Retirement plan.
My sister was just telling me that's what she wants to do when we retire. Okay, a lot of people loved your singing and said you have a beautiful voice. Some folks want to learn more about the lyrics or drum songs, but also they want to hear another little ditty if you got one.
Another little ditty. What?
A song.
Oh, so well, one of the songs that's always out there right now that anybody can learn, and it's online actually, is the Nibe song, which was created by Doreen Day. It's the water song. Nibe in our language means water. And it was something that online, if you go to nibewalk.org, you'll find it there. You'll see her or hear her singing it and her story of how that song came to be. While she was driving her grandson to school every day, they kept passing past this lake where they lived. And I think it was Lake Calhoun near in the Twin Cities area. And as they went by, he, you know, acknowledged that they would say miigwech nibi, and acknowledge how all about that water. And she says it so much more eloquently than I could on that website. So her song, again, it goes, oh, no, now I gotta tune up here. Nibi gisake iko Nimi kwechu nimi go Gishue nimi go Nibi gisake iko Nimi kwechu nimi go Gishue nimi go. And that's how that one goes.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thanks, Bardo. We have a couple more questions. Although I'd love to end on that note because that was beautiful. Sing us home, Edith. Sing them home. But we've got a couple others here. We've got a lawyer joining us tonight, Shinab lawyer, who says she's trying to learn about Anishinaabe law through stories. Can you think of a story that talks about how we dealt with greedy people or people that took too much than they should have?
Oh, geez.
Or maybe we'll have to get back to her. I've got her email.
That, you know, I think one of the stories I think of when she just said that much is probably Chief Seattle's speech is one of the things that needs to be looked at there. I remember, so I just helped with the paper that was written too, and it was entitled Numb to the Stench. And so that is a phrase from one of Chief Seattle's speeches, in that he felt that the non-native was so accustomed to the smell of rotting things and everything. It was like they didn't care. And so what he said was that they are numb to their own stench. They didn't even realize that they were stinking, but that they needed to actually that they were so entrenched in that they couldn't. They were conditioned to it. So I don't know if that makes any sense or anything, but it's something Yeah, and you could probably answer a lot more to her than I could.
Not at all. No, no. Another really lot of questions coming in about your grandma, and how many stories did she share with you, and how do you feel tonight with her? Is she with us tonight? Is she?
Oh no, she's been gone for a long time, since 1969 maybe, and that ages me.
I think they meant, do you feel like she's sitting with you, like from the, in the spirit form,
oh,
or is
yeah.
she just like, oh, Edith can handle this, she'll be good?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, she's always with me. You know, I can always, you know, feel her. And it's funny because, you know, this one time a friend of mine who lived up the road from us, she wanted to get in contact, you know, with her ancestral spirits over there, right? Her mother or relatives from there. So she brought in a medium to her place up the road and said, you know, the medium did its thing, you know, and was like, do you know a Martha? Which was my grandmother. And she looked at the medium. Yeah, I know Martha. She lived up the road over there.
This ain't Martha's time. Get back in the line, Martha. Oh, I love Bad River. Yeah. Bad River women especially. Excuse me, coming through.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. We got to put up the next slides. We're almost to the end. Go ahead. We can still hear you talking.
Yeah. So that's who she seen with the medium, was my grandmother over there rather than her relatives.
So yeah, I'd say she's with us. With us today. So we just want to thank everyone for coming. This is Edith's email. It's Leoso15, because her nickname is Bardo, which starts with a B. So that's not a typo. It's bleoso15@gmail.com. And I know we got a lot of questions, a lot of comments. You can feel free to email her, she said. And also, if you have any other questions, additional questions, like maybe where can I find a story, or what books do you recommend, things like that. All right, if we go to the next slide, and join us for 2 more weeks of stories. Next week, we've got Greg, same time, same place, right here in virtual land. That's from 7 to 8. And then we'll have Leon after.
And I forgot to mention those books that I wanted to mention.
Please do.
Okay, the Mishomis book by The Voice of the Ojibwe by Edward Benton Benet. Native People of Wisconsin by Patty Lowe.
Oh, can you hold them up, Bardo?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because I don't know if everybody can see me. This one, the Mishomis book.
Yep.
Native People of Wisconsin.
Oh, Patty was just on. She might still be on. Patty came on and said, way to go, Bardo, I think. Something to that effect.
The Money Goose by Basil Johnston.
Oh, okay.
And Living Our Language by Anton Truer.
Okay.
And this is Ojibwe Tales and Oral Histories. And you'll find another version of the duck dance in there, I believe.
Nice. Well, those all look really well thumbed. I can tell you've read them and enjoyed them, and they must be good. So thank you.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's listening, when I send the email, I'll send those titles too, because I know everyone always likes to hear that. So we have a survey after, so you can fill out feedback. Let us know how we did tonight, what you thought of Edith, especially what more things would you like to learn and hear about. And her event ID number is 8415. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. I've only got Facebook, but that's okay. I'm getting into this century. So we encourage you to sign up for those things. Do we have another slide, Kristen, or is that it? Maybe that's it. Oh, we did get another message, Edith, that says, miigwech for bringing these good people to us via Zoom. For those of us disabled and caregivers, it is really appreciated. So miigwech to you, Edith.
Awesome.
The sad thing about COVID is, of course, we can't get together, but one of the good things is we've all learned how to Zoom. And I think it's really reaching out to people that otherwise maybe couldn't have come out tonight. You know, it's dark out, it's winter. A lot of people don't want to drive in that. So it's nice you can just join us from your living room to everyone else's. Did you have any final thoughts?
I just wanted to say miigwech to the Wisconsin Historical Society for having me tonight. It was an honor to do this work. Miigwech to everyone for showing up to listen to me. And I hope you enjoyed yourself and have a good evening. Miigwech. Meet you.
That's it. Thanks, Edith.